Just as Clara thought her secret affair was safely hidden in the shadows of her lavish life, someone else had been watching all along. Someone with a dangerous secret of their own. And when her husband uncovers the betrayal, a single pull of the trigger will shatter everything. Clara married Henry Devereaux, a man who had clawed his way to success through sheer determination and shrewd business acumen. Together, they were a power couple. Henry's business empire brought in the money, while Clara's extravagant lifestyle displayed it for all to see. Yet, behind the opulent facade, Clara lived a life devoid of true happiness. While Henry provided her with everything material, he was rarely home. His empire, which had taken him decades to build, now consumed nearly every waking moment. Clara's loneliness festered in the dark corners of their vast mansion, a place filled with servants, luxury, and stillness. The grand parties she threw, attended by social elites and dignitaries, were nothing more than distractions from the void in her life. In the quiet spaces between her soirees and spa days, Clara's mind began to wander. She became restless, desiring more than what her perfectly manicured world could offer. It was in this restless state that Henry decided to hire Liam, a young man from a nearby village, to be Clara's personal driver. Henry believed he was making a charitable choice. Liam was poor, scruffy, and needed work. Henry often reflected on his own humble beginnings, and hiring Liam gave him a sense of satisfaction. It also, conveniently, freed him from having to deal with Clara's complaints about transport whenever she wanted to go somewhere on a whim. When Liam first arrived, Clara barely noticed him. He was just another employee, another face in the sea of servants who maintained her world. With unkempt hair, calloused hands, and worn-out clothes, Liam looked entirely out of place amidst the luxury of the Devereaux estate. Clara didn't care much for the help, and Liam's presence was no exception. But as months passed, Liam began to change. Living under the roof of the Devereaux mansion transformed him. The constant access to food and clean clothes, combined with his growing confidence, helped him shed the roughness of his past. His once shabby appearance gave way to a more refined version of himself. His hair now neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven, and his body, once thin and underfed, now strong from the physical demands of his job. Clara, who had grown bored of her usual indulgences, slowly began to notice Liam. The roughness she had once dismissed had evolved into a rugged handsomeness that intrigued her. She found herself watching him as he polished the cars in the driveway, his muscles flexing under the sun. There was something primal and unpolished about him, a stark contrast to the refined, sterile men she was used to. One evening, Clara attended one of her usual night parties at a high-end club downtown. Her night of drinking and dancing left her intoxicated, far more than usual. By the time she stumbled back to the waiting car, she was barely able to walk. Liam, ever dutiful, helped her into the back seat. As the car sped through the dark streets, Clara lay sprawled across the plush leather seats, her head spinning from the alcohol, her thoughts cloudy. When they arrived at the mansion, Liam attempted to help her inside, his strong arms supporting her fragile, drunken frame. As he carried her up the grand staircase, something in Clara shifted. She felt his hands on her, steady and firm, and in her intoxicated state, she mistook his help for something more. She clung to him tighter than necessary, her breath warm on his neck. Inside her bedroom, Liam gently tried to lower her onto the bed, but Clara, consumed by a sudden and overwhelming desire, pulled him down with her. "Stay," she whispered, her voice a slurred command. Liam, shocked and confused, tried to pull away, but Clara's hands were insistent. His protests were weak. After all, she was his employer. What would he do if she fired him? He had no connections in the city, no other job prospects. Clara's wealth and power loomed over him, and in that moment, he felt utterly powerless. Against his better judgment, Liam gave in to her advances, setting into motion a chain of events neither could stop. Weeks passed after that first night, and Liam found himself trapped in a web of secrecy and shame. Clara's seductions continued sporadically, mostly when she returned home from nights out, too drunk to care about the consequences. Liam, though reluctant, had no choice but to play along. He needed the job. Without it, he'd be forced to return to the life of poverty he had escaped. Clara, fully aware of the power she held over him, wielded it ruthlessly. What had begun as a drunken mistake soon morphed into a twisted, irregular affair. Though their encounters were infrequent, Clara's obsession with Liam grew. She found herself thinking about him more and more, craving his attention even when she wasn't drunk. It wasn't just about the physical connection. Liam had become a forbidden escape from her mundane, lonely existence. The more he resisted, the more she wanted him. For Clara, the thrill was in the control, the ability to dominate and bend him to her will. On the other hand, Liam was trapped in a constant state of fear and guilt. Each encounter left him feeling more degraded, but his financial dependence on Clara kept him from escaping. He had no one to confide in, no one who could help him. He feared that if he tried to leave, Clara would ruin him, her powerful connections in the city ensuring he'd never find work again. So, he stayed silent, performing his duties during the day and dreading the nights when Clara might return home inebriated and demanding. Clara's husband, Henry, had always been a pragmatic man. He knew Clara was not the easiest woman to live with, but he loved her in his own way. However, over the months, he began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She was more possessive, more erratic, especially when it came to Liam. Whenever Henry suggested promoting Liam to his own personal driver, Clara would fly into a rage, her reaction far beyond what he would expect for a simple household matter. Her anger, sharp and irrational, triggered something in Henry's mind. Something wasn't right. Though Henry didn't suspect infidelity at first, he became increasingly wary of the unusual tension between his wife and their driver. The way Clara seemed on edge whenever Liam was around, how she defended him so fiercely, raised red flags. He began to pay closer attention, observing the way they interacted. Small, seemingly insignificant details began to add up. The lingering looks, the slight stiffness in Liam's demeanor, the way Clara's mood would shift dramatically depending on whether or not Liam was nearby. His suspicion gnawed at him, but he wasn't ready to confront Clara just yet. Instead, Henry decided to investigate discreetly. He began keeping track of Clara's nights out, noticing patterns in her behavior when she returned home. On one particularly tense night, he saw something he couldn't ignore: Mira, their young maid, lingering in the shadows as Clara stumbled in, clinging to Liam in a way that was far too intimate for a mere employee. Mira's eyes betrayed knowledge. She knew something. It didn't take long for Mira, who had her own feelings for Liam, to come forward. Mira had watched in silence for months, her heart aching as she saw Clara claim the man she secretly admired. When she finally broke her silence, it wasn't out of pure malice, but rather a mixture of jealousy, anger, and a desire for justice. She told Henry everything: the late-night encounters, the way Clara pulled Liam into her bedroom, and the strained, helpless look on Liam's face each time it happened. Henry was devastated. His world, carefully constructed through years of hard work and sacrifice, began to crumble before his eyes. Clara had betrayed him, and with someone he had chosen to help. The realization twisted something deep inside him, turning his sorrow into a simmering rage. Without a word to Clara, Henry began to plot. He knew exactly where his gun was, the one he kept in his office drawer for protection. One fateful evening, after hearing yet another report from Mira, Henry made his move. His mind was set, his heart hardened. He would end this. The mansion is quiet, the air thick with foreboding. Henry, his face a mask of cold determination, retrieves his gun from the office drawer, and walks toward the garage. Inside, Liam is busy washing the family's luxury car, unaware of the storm about to break. Clara, oblivious to Henry's discovery, saunters into the garage, her usual haughty demeanor on display. She exchanges a few words with Liam, her tone laced with flirtation. For her, this affair has become more than just physical. It's a twisted game of power and control. She enjoys seeing the fear in Liam's eyes, knowing that he is trapped by his dependence on her. But as she speaks, the garage door swings open, and Henry steps inside. The look on his face is terrifying. His eyes filled with a mixture of fury, betrayal, and a cold resolve. Clara freezes, the air suddenly thick with tension. Liam takes a step back, his eyes wide with fear as he sees the gun in Henry's hand. Henry doesn't waste time with accusations or explanations. The evidence of betrayal is already in front of him. Clara and Liam, caught together in the same space, confirming everything he already knew. The silence is shattered when Henry finally speaks, his voice low and menacing. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" Henry's grip tightens on the gun. Clara, for once, is speechless. The power she once held over Liam, over her entire life, has crumbled in the face of Henry's rage. She tries to speak, to offer some explanation, but the words catch in her throat. Liam, trembling, attempts to step forward, to explain that he was forced into this, that he didn't want any of it. But Henry's fury isn't easily placated. In a flash, he raises the gun and pulls the trigger. The sound of the shot echoes through the garage. Liam falls first, the bullet tearing through his chest, blood blooming across his shirt. Clara screams a raw, desperate sound as she lunges toward Henry, her hands reaching for the gun. But Henry, filled with years of pent-up frustration and rage, fires again. The second shot silences Clara's scream. She collapses beside Liam, her eyes wide in shock as blood pools beneath her. For a brief moment, the garage is filled with nothing but the sound of Henry's heavy breathing. He looks down at the bodies of his wife and her lover, the reality of what he's done slowly dawning on him. The rage that had fueled him moments ago fades, leaving behind only numbness. He drops the gun, his hands shaking, his mind struggling to process the horror of what he has just done. The silence in the garage is deafening, the stillness unbearable. Hours later, the police arrive, summoned by the sound of gunshots. They find Henry sitting in his office, his face pale and haunted, staring blankly at the floor. The bodies of Clara and Liam are discovered in the garage, their lives cut short in a moment of violent rage. As Henry is led away in handcuffs, Mira watches from the shadows, her heart heavy with guilt and sorrow. She had never intended for things to end this way. All she had wanted was for Liam to be free of Clara's control. But now, in the wake of the tragedy, Mira is left to wonder if her actions had set the wheels of fate in motion.